But now we'll talk more about the elections. Joining me down the line, I've got Charlie Rowley, who is a former Conservative advisor, and also James Matthewson, former Labour advisor. Good morning, gentlemen.
Good morning.
Right, let's start. Nigel Farage has declared the end of two-party politics after Reform UK secured the greatest ever local election results for an outsider party. He said Reform had had the Labour Party for lunch. He said that Reform UK had wiped out the Conservatives. In parts of England, Reform UK took control of 10 local councils, winning hundreds of seats across areas from Durham to Kent, toppling a 15,000 Labour majority in Runcorn and Helsby. Reform won 10 councils, mayoral elections in Greater Lincolnshire, Hull and East Yorkshire. If you look here, what's crucial is the percentage national share. The percentage national share was 30, and the reason that's important is because you can then extrapolate it. That gives Reform 420 parliamentary seats, putting them well over the 326 needed for a majority. Labour would shrink to 138 seats. Conservatives might as well be actually just working in the kitchens in Parliament, and the Lib Dems on 17. Let's start, if we can, with you, Charlie. The Conservative Party are toast.
Well, it was a terrible night for the Tories. There's no getting away from it. It was a terrible night for Labour. There's no getting away from that either.
I think we've lost your connection, Charlie, actually. James, I'll come to you if I may. It was disastrous for Labour. I was sitting in the election studio at New Broadcasting House with cabinet ministers who didn't know what to say as the numbers came in. I was watching the tally of councillors coming in, the councils changing. All they kept saying was the same platitudes: working people, fixing the foundations, plan for change. It's just a load of word salad. Labour is not listening to what the public is saying.
Well, yeah, it was an absolutely dreadful night, wasn't it? Across the board for the main parties that have existed for some time now, and I think that's why Reform have been benefited from this, is because there is this anti-establishment kind of energy behind Reform that exists. Now it doesn't anymore, I'm afraid. now that they're going to run authorities, and now that they actually
what do you mean?
have power. Well, you can't be anti-establishment and
I
be
see.
the establishment. That's the thing. So, of course, that energy, that benefit that they get of being the outsider comes to an end with every council that they run now. They've got responsibility, and they've got also an opportunity and a chance, I admit that, to show people what they can do. But without the well-oiled machinery that has existed in the Conservative Party for hundreds and hundreds of years, and in the Labour Party for over 100 years, you haven't got that benefit of being able to kind of manage that message to service all of those councillors. Up until now, Reform has existed really has been beneficial as a platform for the likes of Nigel Farage to get up and do press conferences whenever he wants, all this stuff. But that party now has to operate as a political party does and service all of these councillors at a level of local democracy. So it's going to be difficult for them, and it's not going to be easy.
So Sir John Curtis, Britain's foremost polling expert, said Reform surge is unprecedented, said no party has ever beaten both Labour and Tories in council seats and votes in a set of elections. I just want to pick you up on something you said to me last time. You said you talk about the working class communities. You don't know working class communities. Well, I would suggest I do, and I got it right. They voted for Reform UK.
Now, listen, David, I will caution you here, as I've cautioned Labour politicians who I've worked for in the past. Don't get too drunk on your own success, all right? You don't know the exact reason that every single person...
I do know the exact reason. They're sick and tired of... They are sick and tired of the Labour government being woefully out of touch. As I said on the night of the election, people are hurting. Energy bills are too high. They feel the government is just sitting there, not listening to what they need. Energy costs are too high, the cost of living is too high, and the government is totally tone deaf.
Yeah, they've pressed the change button. right? That's what I believe's happened. It seems you agree with that in some regard, that they're sick of the current status quo and that they want change. The things aren't good enough for people as they are right now and as they stand. And I don't think they have been for some time through successive different governments. And they pressed the change button at the general election for Labour in the opposite direction to the Tories, and they've ended up with much of the same as the Tories. It's just a continuation of the status quo. So, of course, they're looking to shake things up. If you're looking to try and, go in a different direction at all, there's only one political party at the moment, really, who are offering that, and that's Reform. Now, that's as far as I'll go in my generosity to Reform. I understand they represent change and they represent anti-establishment vote. However, the things that they stand for, I do not believe are in step with those working class communities.
What like? Looking after your family? Looking after your community? Looking after your country? You don't like that?
Some of the things you've just talked about there, David, they're values that we can all get behind. They're values every single political party.
But they didn't get behind Labour, did they?
No, they're values that every single political party will say that they represent. In reality...
So why did they trust Reform?
No. Talk to me about transgender ideology, because you just mentioned that before we came on.
Well, it's a nonsense. We've had a Supreme High Court ruling on it, and now it has been put to bed.
What is transgender ideology? Explain it to me.
What has this got to do with anything?
Well, it's the fact that it takes prominence in the Reform message. They've got an issue with the pride flag being flown places.
No, they don't. You are talking utter nonsense. Let's go to... James, I can't listen to any more hogwash. I'm going to bring in Charlie Rowley now. Charlie, the Conservative Party got an absolute battering, lost all of the council seats, all of the councils that it had control of before the election. Kemi Badenoch has issued an apology. Fine. She has no idea how to go, where she goes from here, how she regroups. And the front page, I think, of the Telegraph this morning just says, we won't outflank Farage on the right. To me, this shows a woeful understanding of what's going on, because the voters who came to Reform aren't right-wingers. These are people who have come from tribally Labour parties. We saw huge votes coming from the industrial heartlands in the north that believe they've been completely let down by successive administrations. But we also have seen Reform votes coming from the shires, from Middle England as well. Something dramatic has happened here in the political landscape.
It has. And just that little conversation there highlights why people from both the Labour Party and the Tory Party are fed up with the status quo and have driven to Reform because it positions itself as the party of common sense. People didn't vote for the Labour Party at the general election because they wanted change for Labour. They voted for the Labour Party as they saw it as the alternative because they were fed up with the Tory Party chopping and changing its leader, the internal politics, the lack of getting on top of issues that people cared about, like dealing with immigration, etc., etc. They wanted lower taxes. They just wanted rid. This Labour government have not been a continuation of the Tories. Dare I say it, they've been even worse. They've taken away the winter fuel allowance, they've taxed farmers, and they've not even been able to define, apologies I missed, or I'm not sorry I missed, that previous conversation about transgender ideology. I don't think I missed much, because you've had a Prime Minister of this country that doesn't even know or hadn't known what a woman is. And if you're still obsessed about that kind of debate, you are missing the point. The great British people of this country want this government, or want their government, to deal with the cost of living, getting the economy back on track, making sure that their kid, their boy or girl, can go to a good or outstanding school. They want to make sure that they can have the NHS that's there for them, that's not abused, that's a national health service, not an international health service. They want to make sure that when they get up in the morning, if they go to work, if they play by the rules, if they do the right thing, that the economy is going to reward them. If you're getting involved still in this conversation about attacking minorities, which is not the case, and the Supreme Court was very clear about those that identify as transgender, but it was making it absolutely clear that you can have, in sports in particular, people that identify as female but are born men, you cannot compete. Bringing this country back to a common sense approach Most people welcome that. If you're in the Labour Party still obsessing about that, then I'm afraid that's the reason why you've seen Reform do so well. And if you don't get that, you're only going to see Reform do well in the future.
James.
Yeah, well, I'm afraid there's only one person obsessing about it, and that's the person who mentioned transgender ideology in the classroom, which was David.
No, you mentioned it. You mentioned it.
I mentioned it. Reform were the only
What
political
are you talking, James? What are you talking about?
David, you're talking over me. Let me finish. Reform were the only political party to mention transgender ideology in their manifesto.
But, James, let me just pause you. That we had a ruling before the election. So Reform was right. The court came down on the side of Reform and its policy. But that is not what... But that is not... It did.
Down on the side of anyone.
It did. It said... But, listen, I don't want to go down a debate about trans because it's been settled by the courts.
You're absolutely right. And Charlie's right. We shouldn't just focus on that issue.
So let me ask you this question then. Keir Starmer got an absolute thumping, and yet he's put cheese in his ears. He says, I get it, and then presses the accelerator saying that's why we need to accelerate our plan for change. He is delusional.
I mean, they haven't changed hardly anything. That's the problem.
That's right.
If you ask people what Labour stands for and what it represents currently, they haven't got a clue. They don't know. They're directionless. And it's the same with the Tories. And because of that, you've got them wandering around all trying to work out what they stand for and what they represent. And because of that, you've got Reform coming up the middle, taking votes off both of them. If you dominate your own side of politics, take care of your side of the street. The Labour Party is a centre-left party. I don't ever think that Charlie will vote Labour. I don't ever expect you to ever vote Labour, David. But I want the people who want a progressive political party. And we talk about, the biggest kind of phrase that grinds my gears at the moment in politics is common sense. Because that makes no sense. It's an empty phrase. Common sense is just what everybody thinks their own opinion is.
That's not true.
To me, common sense is very different to your common sense. So actually, it doesn't mean anything in a measurable sense of the word.
Hang on a minute, that's absolute claptrap. Common sense is putting British interests first. It's actually making sure that we help... Hang on a minute. It's about helping people with the cost of living. It's making sure that we feel secure on the streets. It's making sure our children are safe in schools. It's making sure that we achieve the best for the best and the brightest. We try and do everything by meritocracy in this country. I don't think any of that is not common sense.
No, all of that is what everybody agrees on, but that's not.
But they don't, do they?
No, but that's not politics. Politics isn't the outside of the box. It's the inside. It's how you do that. Me and the Tories, look, I could sit down with Charlie all day long. We can agree on the principles of what we want to see and achieve. Me and Charlie probably got into politics for exactly the same reason. However, how we do that, that's politics.
Let me ask Charlie then. Charlie, Keir Starmer, I am absolutely gobsmacked that Keir Starmer says he gets it, and then clearly then enacts more of the same, proving he doesn't get it.
Well, I agree with James to a certain extent that I think everybody, 99% of people, do want the same thing, but it is how you achieve that. But I do think if you ask probably 99% of people in the Labour Party, would you take away the winter fuel allowance from pensioners? They'd say no. Do you think it's fair if you're that coalition that voted Tory in 2019 for Boris Johnson in the Red Hall, who voted for Brexit? Do you think it's fair that people that come into this country legally should get priority over housing? We could all of a sudden get some sort of deal with landlords, that they get a 5-year tenancy. Most people would say, duh, no. That's common sense, but that is something that the Labour Party are completely, the current government, I should say, the Labour government, not everyone in the Labour Party, but the current government are completely rudderless of. It's that common sense that you talked about, David. It's about fairness. It's about putting the British people first. It's about making sure that actually, the choice between having energy bills higher because of a drive to net zero versus lower energy bills, all the while trying to maintain a cleaner, greener environment, it's a no-brainer. Why on earth Ed Miliband I was trying to think of something else to call him then. Is determined. The fact that Tony Blair, former Labour Prime Minister, had to intervene only last week to say this is nuts because it's costing the taxpayer. And I don't think that was an untimely intervention the day before the local elections. He knew exactly what he's doing because you know what? Whether you like Tony Blair or not, he's a politician, he's a political operator, he gets politics. You don't have to agree with everything he says, but he knows how to play politics. Whereas Keir Starmer knows clearly zero about it and had the audacity to turn up at a defence plant in Bedfordshire the day after the local elections and not mention the loss of Runcorn, not mention the loss of what was to be for Labour Party councillors or Labour councillors up and down the country, because he doesn't get the politics. So I agree most people want the same thing, but what has happened is that the Tories have failed after chopping and changing their leader so often and not addressing the issues that most people want. This Labour government clearly don't have a clue. So people are turning to reform, but they're not just turning to reform because they're there. They're turning to reform because what Nigel Farage is saying is the right thing. It is about common sense, but it's about returning pride, dignity to the British people. It's about returning back to common sense values, about looking after the majority of people. It's
common sense. You can't just say common sense to mean your own view and opinion.
But James, let me
tell you.
Hang on, chaps. I don't want an ethereal conversation, but Charlie is saying the reason, so if I'm paraphrasing what Charlie said, he's saying it's not a protest vote going to reform, that reform is saying, listening to the electorate, and is saying exactly what the electorate want, which is if you come here illegally, you will be deported. We will look after British people first. We will ensure they get on the housing ladder. We will get cheap energy bills. We're going to stop the madness of net zero. We're going to stop these bonkers green policies. And James, that is what people voted for.
No, I'm afraid I think you're wrong. I think you're both wrong on that. It's not the case. I think people are falling, drinking the Kool-Aid when it comes to this idea that all the working class communities are the same and that everybody in them wanted exactly that outcome, wanted exactly those policies, wanted to hear them. They are so frustrated. And this was, and God love me, I don't want to revisit Brexit, for the love of God, but at the same time, this was the same thing that we saw on the ground. And those of us who were, I was trying to get the Remain vote out in parts of England where other people weren't even paying any attention. I knew that it was going to go, to a leave. Other people ignored that. But the same thing is happening now. They are ignoring those communities, and because they've ignored those communities, the only other option available at the moment is reform. But don't take that to mean that your idea of a patriotic curriculum, whatever the hell that means, because nobody knows what it means, the idea of attacking transgender ideology, the idea of
You're obsessed with trans. What is the obsession?
The only person who's mentioned it. Before we came on air, you said that transgender ideology in the classroom was one of the main issues.
I did not say that. But you are obsessed. You are obsessed. This is, I think, what Charlie's. Hang on a minute, James. The point that Charlie made was the disconnect between central Islingtonian Labour government and their obsessions. James, be quiet. Their obsessions with these minority subjects, whereas they are ignoring what everyone is telling me on the streets. They are hurting. They can't afford to put food on the table. They are being made to have heat pumps.
We know that firsthand, some of us, right? People like you and the millionaires in the Reform Party do not know that.
Where did you get... James, you are... Cut James off. I'm sorry, James. I'm not having that. That is not acceptable.
Made up of the most powerful and rich among us, all right? Your MPs...
Say that again. Say that again.
Your MPs, as it stands, are millionaires. You've got people there, Nigel Farage, Richard Tice... Andrew
Jenkins as our mayoral candidate who looks after a special educational needs child. We've got Sarah Pochen. She's not a millionaire.
Those communities, I'm talking about how your party is run and how it's been run.
You know nothing about it.
All right? And what you're talking about, when it comes, we'll see this come at the crunch when you have to run authorities. You have to make real decisions. And this is going to be a real problem for you. But what I'm talking about is the fact that you would rather, because you talk about obsessions with minorities, there is only one political party in the country that is talking about transgender ideology and trying to blame minorities for our problems, right? The majority of people in working class communities aren't on board with that message. They're not.
James, I'm going to read you a message here. Tim, James is talking rubbish. What's on the inside is the core. The core affects the outside. It's common sense. We want no immigration, net zero, 1.5 million houses, only 10% to be social housing. The core is incorrect. So essentially, I'm aghast at James Matthewson, particularly when he claims Labour hasn't done anything yet. Increasing NI, the economy crashes, winter fuel allowance, farmers' land, removing the only deterrent for illegals, net zero, increasing council tax when Keir Starmer said he wouldn't. The issue behind Labour here, and sorry, Charlie, I need to get you in here, but isn't the issue here for Labour, Charlie, that Labour blatantly lied?
Well, yes. I mean, for want of a better word, absolutely. I mean, my question would be, and my thought is, and again, being sort of generous, look, you know, even in the run-up to the general election, I mean, people, again, will have a view about Tony Blair. But even in the run-up to the general election, Tony Blair said the Labour Party shouldn't get itself tied up in knots about gender ideology, about all of that, because it's affecting a minority. It needs to focus on the bread and butter politics. So my question, or my thought is, look, even though it was a terrible night for the Conservatives, they lost every council that they were controlling. They lost hundreds of councillors. It's bad news for the Tories. They've got a long way to come back from. But if you look in Runcorn, that was a 40... Look, I know what it's like to lose a 14,000 majority, 16,000 majority seat, to the Lib Dems under Boris's time when there were by-elections in North Shropshire and the like. Labour have just lost a 15,000 majority seat in Runcorn. They have lost Durham County Council, not just by a handful of Reform councillors, by a cataclysmic transition of councillors that have come in. They slipped through the middle when it came to the west of England. They pipped Reform to the post in North Tyneside, in Doncaster, because arguably you could say that the right vote was split between Reform and the Tories. If it wasn't for those Tory candidates, or if it wasn't for both of those parties standing, Reform would have had an absolute clean sweep. So that's my question to anybody in the Labour Party that might still not want to change course, or might think that actually everything's going fine, we just need to double down, we need to get through the hard times. You've got to sit down and ask yourself, why are so many people, not just in the south, because a lot of the Tory seats were lost to the Lib Dems and Reform, but Reform were winning greatly in the north. So if you're a Labour Party member, and this is what I just would be keen to do from James, politely ask, what is it that Labour think that they're still doing that's so great? Or why can't you recognise that Reform have done so well, not on the back of Tory failure, but it's on the back of Labour failure now? And can you not understand why Reform are doing so well? Because they are talking the talk, they are talking about the issues that the general public, the great British public, really care about, and the Labour Party and the Conservatives previously have been totally absent about those conversations. They've been nowhere near speaking the language of the British people, and that's why Reform are doing so well.
Let me pause it there. I need to go to a break. We'll continue this conversation after the break. We're in a very heated discussion with Charlie Rowley and James Matthewson. So many messages coming in. I failed to mention this earlier, of course. James Matthewson accused everyone in Reform UK of being a millionaire, or at least those in charge of being a millionaire. I can assure you, James, I am not a millionaire. Also, by the way, it is worth pointing out the leader of the Labour Party is a millionaire, as are lots of people in the so-called Working People's Party. Lots of you saying, tell James Starmer is a millionaire. James hasn't got a clue. This is why Labour was lost. James is so wrong. This is Cheryl. And just wow. And let's bring the chaps back now. Paul Burnett wants to say something to... This is Paul in Leeds, actually. James, Paul says, just wow. That's James Matthewson sums up why Labour are finished.
Yeah, I know what your viewers think of me, David, because every time I come on here afterwards, I get about 20 emails calling me the worst names imaginable.
Why do you think that is? Why do you think that is?
Why are you talking over me? Let me finish.
Because I'm in charge.
All right, okay, great. What happens is every time I come on here, and it's the same thing, and there's no, I mean, I would hope you would call this out, of course, and I know you would. But the emails that I always get from talkTV viewers are always racial in nature as well. It's awful. You've got some really horrible racist viewers out there who I know you obviously wouldn't tolerate, but some of them are absolutely dreadful, and they call me horrible, dreadful things.
I condemn all racism.
All of the UK media. I do all of the UK media, and I get the worst abuse.
Why would you get racist?
When I come on here.
Obviously, racism in all forms is absolutely unacceptable.
Mm.
Why would you get racist emails? That seems very strange to me.
No, like calling me an N-word lover, a P-word lover, an immigrant lover, all of this stuff. These are your viewers. They say that I'm obviously, I'm part of the global elite, and there's, all this conspiratorial kind of Trump MAGA type language that you hear. And some of your viewers, unfortunately, hold those views, which is a real shame.
If it is true that these are unpleasant emails, I'm very sorry for that, and they should not be acceptable. But let's just go back to the issues at hand. Charlie made some excellent points just before the break. Charlie, do you just want to succinctly just put that back to James, what you were saying, which I think, to paraphrase, was that if Labour can't see the problems, that is why Labour has lost?
Yes, they were some excellent points. I just wish I could remember what they were.
Well, I think, all right.
I agreed with them, by the way. I agreed with them. Everything Charlie said was right, yeah.
But I think that the crux of what I was trying to say was that with all of these issues going on and the way in which the voting, the way in which people have voted has shifted. These are people who are not Tories. These are people who are that might have voted in 2019 for the Tory party. That's what brought them the red wall in 2019. But they've clearly deserted Labour as well. They deserted the Tories after 5 years, after the last general election. They've deserted the Labour Party after just 9 months, it seems. So something has gone wrong. And I was just trying to make the point that I think that there needs to be recognition at the heart of the government as to why that is, because they've been dealing with maybe issues that are not the bread and butter issues that the public want. And the public don't believe the spin, maybe because they've heard it before, or because they genuinely don't believe about things like, well, if we've got to take away the winter fuel allowance, it's because of hard decisions that they've got to make on the back of 14 years, or is it political decision-making? I think people, everyday working people will find it difficult, and I'm being genuine, I'm not being sort of overly political, but I think, the choice between starting up GB Energy, which nobody maybe understands or really appreciates, or giving public sector pay rises day one, scrapping a Rwanda policy, which, okay, costed a lot of money, absolutely. We didn't see the effects of that policy because it was scrapped on day one. So you scrap a deterrent when it comes to illegal immigration, you pay out to public sector workers, all the while you're increasing national insurance contributions on the backbone of our economy, which is people that run their businesses, taking away the winter fuel allowance, and getting rid of a deterrent, regardless of how much it paid, on the number one issue that people care about, which is tackling migration. People find that odd. Worse than odd, they find that obviously wrong, which is why they voted reform. And so the Labour Party must recognise that.
James, what comes up time and time on the door is immigration, legal and illegal immigration, the pressure on public services, people not being able to get a doctor's appointment, dentist's appointment. People want to see an end to it. Labour said they would smash the gangs. The numbers have gone up exponentially, over 11,000 arrivals this year alone. That's a 40% increment on last year. It's total failure.
Yeah, undoubtedly. I think for many years now, the issue of immigration especially has been a very uncomfortable one for many people to talk about on the left. They didn't really know what their position was on it, and what their view about immigration is. But vastly still, if you ask people on the left, they will come up with different kind of views and opinions on immigration and what's right. You go right from people who are pro everything, open borders, very small minority of people, normally in the Green Party, right the way through to people who believe in controlled and checked immigration. Now, it's about everybody's different opinion on this. I do not believe that everybody who has voted for reform or everybody who even brings up the issue of immigration as a concern is, a zealot in the issue, and want to see people punished or want to see boats turned back and all the rest of it. There is a way to do this that is managed and succinct. Now, I believe the issue, having seen this firsthand when I worked in Parliament, comes from years and years of austerity cuts to the Home Office, and the Home Office trying to rejig what it did. The waiting lists in the Home Office for asylum applications are absolutely outrageous and ridiculous.
But James, with the greatest of respect, many of these illegal migrants are not coming here because they're asylum seekers. They're men of economic working age. Well, we know this is true. They're chucking their passports in the sea. If you come here illegally, surely you should be deported immediately.
Really, I don't really care, David, because if you come here and you make an asylum claim, it needs to be processed by the country you make the asylum claim in. If we think we are that weak of a nation and we are that incapable of processing paperwork that we cannot do asylum applications, then I'm sorry, we should just pack it in and go home. These people have a right. You have a right. It is a fundamental human right, if you claim asylum, to be able to have your asylum case looked at and considered. The question is that we come down to is, what do you do with the people in the meantime while their asylum claim is being processed? The asylum claim shouldn't take a year to process. That's the problem here. You know, this problem hasn't just appeared overnight. It's been years and years of underfunding, changes to the Home Office being run absolutely terribly, and with more rhetoric than action coming out of the Home Office about dinghies and about small boats and all the rest of it. I could not care what somebody's reason is for coming to the UK. They have a right to put in the paperwork. If that's then rejected, then they get deported and they get sent home. That's right. But how you process them people in the meantime, I understand. It's a bit like prisons. People don't want to put the money in where they see, you know, undeserving people in their mind or attention. But unfortunately, these are functions of state and they have to be carried out.
Charlie, final word.
Well, look, I agree again, up to a point. I mean, look, the Home Office has not been fit for purpose for many, many years. That was Labour Home Secretary John Reid that said that years ago, that the Home Office is not fit for purpose. And so we know that there are issues there. But what the British people fundamentally have a problem with, look, James is right. It shouldn't take long to process somebody's application. But that's the horror that the British people have to face day in, day out, when they see swathes of people coming in on boats, knowing that their process will take such a long time that they're going to have to foot the bill for their hotel accommodation, or for their stay, or for their benefits, or for whatever else that you are able to claim and receive just by appearing on shores. When you are not a genuine asylum seeker, of course every claim has to be processed, but it's the case that many people just come here to chance their arm because they're economic migrants. They're not fleeing for the reasons that we would naturally accept people coming into this country. So it's about fairness. And for far too long, the British people have felt that they are not being treated fairly, that the government is currently part of, as you said earlier on, I think, David, which was quite well summarised, an Islington metropolitan elite North London lawyer said, that doesn't actually get the politics of what the British public are interested in, what the British people care for, and that's why, on the back of Tory failures of the past, this current Labour failure in the present, and that's why they're looking to reform for the future.